بشكل موجز جدا هذه الجلسة أنا سعدت جدا بأن طلب إلي أن أدير هذه الجلسة.
It's my pleasure to be running this session. We need to sit down. It was my pleasure to be asked to manage this session. First, the importance of Yemen for me and those people who have honored us to accept participating in this session. And the second thing is that this session expresses the model of what the East is trying to do, or the Sharq is trying to do. We're trying to have, even at the times of non-consensus, a place where people from different backgrounds work together. And within this conflict, we shall have the space to have a dialogue and to sit together. This is one of the most important values which Al-Sharq is trying to do. Having this session about Yemen and the situation of Yemen and the responsiveness of all our guests who come from different backgrounds, affiliations and parties, which expresses the main trends in Yemen, is something which gives me joy and which expresses the function of Al-Sharq Forum. We are going to be tackling two important issues. First, to draw a map about the conflict of Yemen, to try to understand this conflict and how it is affected by international and regional forces. And next, to talk about solutions, the basis for this, what are the strategies to be used to reach a reconciliation. Those two axes are the main axes or topics, and we are going to listen to answers about those questions from different points of view. And this, not to be long, we start with Mr. Mohammad Sabri, the leader in the Nasserite movement, and who's going in the party, and who's going to tell us how can we draw the map of the conflict in Yemen, and what are the possible solutions, and what are the basis for this. Each speaker has 10 minutes. Please commit to the time so that people can participate with you. Actually, we would like to provide all thanks to people in the forum, to Dr. Muhammad and to everyone present who is going to listen to the crisis, things in regard to the crisis in Yemen. Of course, talking about the crisis in front of you, it's going to be difficult to reduce and summarize. However, I hope that the dialogue and the comments will be completing this shortcoming. I will tackle this issue from 2 points. First, how to describe the parties in the conflict. Second, what are the solutions or the beginnings of reaching solutions. Before we go into the two issues, I would like to describe that what's happening in Yemen is a crisis which is very sophisticated and which has a lot of surprises. The evidence for this is 3 indicators which we need to take into consideration. The first, the collapse of the alliances, the alliance of the coup in Sana'a, which had ended with the death of one of the sides, the previous President Ali Abdullah Saleh in last December. at the same time at which there is a fragility in regard to the legitimate government and having problems the same way we had in Aden in January when we had this problem between the transitional council and the national forces and the alliance of the Arabs who are here to support the legitimacy have some positions sometimes which are not in harmony with their announced goal, which is to re-seize legitimacy. I stop here in this regard into the ambiguity and the complexity of this crisis, and I start talking about who are the parties in this conflict. In regard to the parties' description, we believe that it's not in the best interest of the Yemenis to describe it as chaos without having a specific sides to it. The best interest politically is that there is a coup which have made the capital fall in September for the interest of militias. They said that they are rebels, and this is their own description of themselves. However, for the best interest of the Yemenis, we need to have this clear. The other side in this conflict is the government, which is legitimate according to the international community, which came through consensus and elections after 2011 revolution. Between those two sides today, we have a confrontation which is bloody today, and the two sides show a lot of fragmentation, violence. The two sides are fighting using arms. Looking at them with all their dimensions, the government represents the state. The rebels represent one Yemeni side. Of course, we cannot say that they are not Yemenis. However, their behavior is confrontational with the state. The two sides, and this is the complexity, is that we have Saudi Arabia leading the Arab alliance, while having also Iran as a side which is in sympathy and with the militias and arming them. This confrontation had started to appear clearly since 2014. They used to say, the Iranians said the fourth Arab capital, had fallen into the hands of Iran. And as Yemenis, we understand that Saudi Arabia believes that we are the security strand of Saudi Arabia, or belt, and that whatever will come from outside the region will affect their security. Even for the rest of our brothers of the Gulf, we are in sympathy with their fears, especially that we had previous experiences in regard to this Arab security issues, which prove that the concerns are valuable and valid. The Saudi thing is not just related to Yemen. There are also other regional files. There are Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and others. That's why any movement in the other regional files will be reflected in the Yemeni file, and any advancement in the Yemeni file will affect the other regional issues. This makes this crisis something outside the control, since we have so many things outside the control of the governments or people. That's why the escalation scenario might be possible, but this does not mean that there is a horizon for searching for the points of agreement, and this is because there is no one crisis which will not be solved except by an agreement. We might sometimes have some lack of vision or some of shortcomings in regard to what we do. However, I'm going to present in front of you what we think is a possible solution. I hope that I can cover this within the time limit. In regard to to turning a new page in Yemen, we shall have the basics for solution. We believe that those are available for Yemenis. We don't have a problem with that. The Yemenis have had a dialogue with each other for over 5 years, where they have went through the official channels, and they reached national and regional and international decisions. There was a political dialogue for 5 years. We have the basics for and references for dialogue, and the Houthis were partners. When we talk about basics, we talk about a consensus of all the nation. The Houthis, even after what they've done, they cannot say we cannot bind ourselves to this because they were partners. First, those basics or principles came through peaceful processes, and none of the sides have forced the other party to go into this dialogue. The second thing, those principles were supported by national, regional, and international decisions. To mention to you, if you might not know the details, we have 3 references today: the outcomes of the national dialogue, the mechanism and the initiative of the Gulf, and the Security Council resolutions. However, we have obstacles in front of applying those principles. The first, which have appeared in more than one place, is the fear the Houthis have in regard to using those principles, especially that the history of Yemen shows that there was always a revenge political. Yemenis apply this, and this applies to all the people in the area. This fear had appeared in Yemen and Kuwait negotiations in regard to the tracks, which is before the other. Do we start with the security or the political track? The second thing, the two parts are fragile. The two sides have a problem with the fragility. Their agreements sometimes cannot be applied. There is also the lack of confidence in Houthis, since they are not abiding to the principles of the dialogue, and they have a problem with the police forces in Sana'a. It's normal to have fears from them in regard to the next agreement, because they don't apply or commit to what they agree to. The last point. Thank you very much for you. In general, I will give you this in a question. The description of what had happened in Yemen and the conflict in Yemen is that there is a political track which used to be present until 2014. Later, there was an intervention of arms and the military processes, which have led into the tensions and the appearance of this civil conflict. And to solve the issue, we need to go back to the agreement of 2014. This is one of the narrations or the descriptions of the conflict of Yemen. Now with Mr. Ibrahim Al Dalemi, I'm sorry, who's the head of Masera network. He's going to describe this conflict, the sides, possibilities, and of solutions from maybe another point of view. In the name of God, first, I'd like to thank Al-Sharq Forum for allowing us this chance and to try to go into the phantom of depth of this issue. Paving the way to open a new page and to reach a political solution which is sustainable, which will stop this irony which is happening in Yemen, the happy Yemen, to tackle the Yemeni issue through the surface by describing it in an incorrect manner, considering that this is a conflict between what is legitimate and the rebels, is not right. But there is a conflict between political sides. On the other side, we see there are national, international, and regional forces which are interfering, which are America, Britain, Saudi Arabia, and Emirates, which are using the foreign forces inside the Yemeni lands, and they are killing by mass through using arms and also air strikes. I say here that the government in Sana'a and in Riyadh, what is called Hadi's government, brothers in the southern movement or the transitional council in the south, all of them shall be Yemenis against any type of international intervention from any side. We need to have our own decisions by ourselves. And this shall be done through the help of the Muslims and Arab countries from the Islamic Conference. The international institutions have looked at this problem through the surface only, trying to only accommodate the concerns of Saudis. And this have affected a main principle, which is if the problem is amongst Yemenis, but it has the dimension of the international community, and maybe the international community or the regional interference is also part of it. There are the three references which are used to show the political path, the dialogue, and the national dialogue's output is something which no one wants to evade. But when we talk about the outcomes of this conference, which is related to dividing Yemen into 6 regions, a big part of Yemenis see that the basic base for this was sectarian. And there was an unjust division which was not well studied. Even before the problems have started, the people opposed this. The other reference which they're talking about is the region, the Gulf Initiative, which came from the point of view of the youth of the revolution to stop the revolution which started in February 2011 and to handcuff this revolution through the international and regional intervention. It's wrong to think that the Gulf Initiative was accepted by all Yemenis, because there were 2 important sides who were marginalized, Ansarullah and the Southern Movement. The third reference is the international resolutions in regard to Yemen, and they only talk about 2216, which have arrived after the military intervention in Yemen and aggression. We see that this is an aggression, not a military intervention, and it doesn't have any legitimacy. This intervention, after which the resolution was issued, this resolution, even the ones who have written it through the envoys, Ismail Walad al-Sheikh efforts and Martin Grether, have come back to prove that there is no possibility of really applying this, but we need to find a new formula to implement it outside this literality of it. It cannot be implied or applied, but there are some people trying. Fourth reference, the international community had forgot, which is the ability to have partnership, which says that there shall be partnership on all levels of government, starting with the presidency in Yemen and going through government, the parliament, and in all different military security apparatuses and governorates. We don't have a real partnership. We need a real partnership which takes into consideration all the weights of all the political parties, and which looks at the social and historical problems of Yemen, and they deal with them in a normal manner to stop the tension, sectarial tension, and this shall be through a rational Islamic moderate discourse which takes into consideration the specificity of Yemen without going into prejudices. This is an overview of the Yemeni issue, but we need to be aware that it is enough to have all 3 years of fighting, not just amongst Yemenis, but as Muslims and Arabs. It's enough bloodshed. We need to be courageous and address this in a real manner. We have alliances. One of the problems is our alliances. Arab countries, Islamic countries, and the regional organizations. We wanted those all to help us unite, and instead they were polarized. The Islamic Conference, for example, we would have loved them to help us. However, they sided with one of the sides over against the other. We shall not forget that there is a crisis in Yemen. There is the cholera, there is also the other diseases, and also the lack of having salaries for the employees of the public services. We need immediately to start to give the salaries back to the employees. Since everyone is interfering in Yemen through the 18 countries, what is called the 18 countries or the 18th group, which was in Kuwait and in Switzerland negotiations, they were negative. They had a negative impact. The rational people from the regional countries which were not part of this conflict shall help the Yemenis in reunite and put them on the same table. As Yemenis, we don't trust the international community organizations no more, and they were one of the reasons why the conflict continued until now. This is a very quick overview. 10 minutes are not enough, but that's just to give you an overview so that you should not only listen to one point of view, but to a number of points of view. We leave the floor to the rest of the questions, and if you have anything to say, we are ready to receive your questions. We'd like to thank Al-Sharq Forum and the organizers. Hope to see a happy Yemen in the future, and that all those wounds are cured. We don't only want the coexistence amongst Yemenis. We want to go further than that. We are all Yemenis. We don't have minorities. We all have the equal citizenship principles, and the national dialogue principles are our basis for this. Thank you very much.
From this dialogue, we have some problems that started to crop up regarding some issues, like the issue of the reference, which we have to go back to, and who the parties are who play the roles of mediation and to mediate among the parties. There is the problem of groupings. Also another problem, which is the regional and national dimension, and how the regional one is more complex, and it complicates things. And also the military and political dimension, how to start regarding trying to solve this problem in Yemen. Now, around these problems that are interlinked, how to solve the problem, how to find the solution, and how to go back to an active track to solve this problem. Mr. Mohammad Abdul Malek, the Vice Secretary General for a reformist group in Yemen. He'll talk about a couple of things related to the political solution in Yemen, the national and regional problems. Thank you very much. We thank the guys in Sharq Forum. Before talking about the international dimensions, I'll give you a snapshot about what's happened in Yemen. Yemen is one of the countries that witnessed Arab Spring, and it was among the countries where which witnessed peaceful demonstrations for 2 years all through Yemen, from the north to the south to Aden, Hadramaut, and all through Yemen. And then later on, the Yemenis kept on using or following the peaceful solution and the peaceful way, and that witnessed the national dialogue for 1 month and a half. The Yemenis had dialogue among each other, including the Houthis and all of the parties. And all of the parties sponsored by national and international bodies, and this came up with outcomes of the national conference dialogue, and they talked about the fact that the country will be a federal, talked about federalism with 6 regions. And then the Yemenis were surprised later on that one group revolted against all of the outcomes and all of the legislative authority represented by Abdalwahhab, who was the president, and the government was detained, and the president's home was besieged, and you know what happened. And about 20 guards, presidential guards, were killed, and the president was besieged for 1 month by the militias, and militias did not get enough. Rather, they moved from the north to the south in Aden. Now, we're suffering from those militias and their backers, they reached the bordering areas of Aden. The president, who withdrew to Aden, had to resort to the Arab and International Alliance. So the main problem here is that there was a revolution against the outcomes of the national dialogue. So that is the main thing that happened. The Yemen's international and regional center, Yemen has common borders with Oman and Saudi Arabia, so it has a strategic location. Another thing here is that Yemen has about 2,600 kilometers as coastal line, about 2,600 kilometers, and it has 2,000 kilometers borders with Saudi Arabia and Oman. And the big advantage here, and it's a problem at the same time, that Yemen controls the constraint, the straits there, Bab al-Mandab Straits. So some international actors would like to control that strait, because 1,600,000 barrels of oil go through that strait. That strait also is together with Hormuz and Malacca is one of the most important straits. Therefore, Iran supported Houthis to take hold of that strait because they already control Hormuz Strait, so they provoked the Houthis to take control of Bab al-Mandab Strait and to weaken the role of Suez Channel or Canal. The KSA, since it has bordering areas with Yemen, 2,000 kilometers, Saudi Arabia had to help the national army. Now, the national army after the militias were controlling many areas in Yemen, but now it controls 85% of Yemen, supported by many other forces. But let's go back a little bit. When participants of the National Dialogue Conference, the government detected two ships, Jihan 1 and Jihan 2, during the National Dialogue Conference. Those ships were coming from Iran to support the coup militias. And that was documented, actually, because Iran wants to take control of that area. Are there scenarios for the for any political solution rather than a military one? There are three scenarios. The first scenario, which is painful, like this war will carry on and continue until it becomes a civil war, and this is a very upsetting and annoying scenario. And then this will lead to the division of Yemen, and now there are some initiatives of division. Hadramaut, Aden, Taiz, and now Taiz does not accept this, does not accept to be ruled by the center, or so there has to be a kind of division. Now the third scenario here, which is positive, which is going through a political compromise. The legitimate government, in addition, all of the parties, they get together and find a political solution. Therefore, there are negotiations with of Kuwait, and there was Geneva negotiations, and they understand that there has to go back to the previous political track before revolting against the National Dialogue Conference. So that is the most peaceful, and that is the best solution, which leads Yemen to agree on putting aside arms and to find the guaranteeing government. The guaranteeing government will be able to handle all of everything on the area. Thank you very much. We're still here talking about two points of view that are rejecting to get closer to each other. But I think that carrying on with this deadlock entails a lot of repercussions, especially when it comes to the humanitarian situation in Yemen. And I think that Mr. Abdalwahhab Muawdah will shed light in part of his talk about this problem, how the persistence of the crisis in Yemen affects the humanitarian situation there, and he'll also talk about the role of the NGOs, regional NGOs. In the name of God, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much. We thank the brothers in Sharq Forum for giving me this chance. No, everybody knows that Yemen is living very difficult and miserable circumstances since the war waged by Houthis and controlling Sana'a, the center, and then spreading around all over the country under the force of arm, which was taken from the stores of the country, and it used all of the security, financial, media capabilities, and all of other resources in the country to wage war against Yemen, from the north to the south, and east to the west. And then later on, there was a coup against all of the governmental institutions, legislative, judiciary, and the president and the prime minister were excluded, and the parliament was closed, and the constitution was suspended, and so it destroyed everything the Yemenis did since the revolution of the 26th of November until those militias waged war against Yemen. And all of the institutions, governmental institutions, were dissolved, whether civil society organizations, parties, syndicates, and others. All of those were non-operational, and they imposed an iron grasp on them, which led to the war, an internal war, and confrontations, and then regional intervention, and then the Arab coalition after the call from the elected president, and then Yemen started a conflict, and the coalition tried to save what's left in Yemen, and the war actually turned Yemen upside down in an unprecedented way. As a result, this was reflected on the lives of all of the Yemenis, except a very limited group from the elitists, while the others, other Yemenis, they are in a very difficult situation, very bad humanitarian situation. Okay, I have 10 minutes only, but actually talking about the situation, the miserable situation Yemen is witnessing needs a lot of time, and also what the Yemenis are, how the Yemenis are violated, their security, their rights are violated. If I keep talking for 10 hours, I'll not be able to cover it. But I'll try to make it brief. First, regarding the economy, the economic situations since 2016 until now, and the salaries in the civil servants and the employees haven't been paid, and the rebels are able to pay the salaries of the employees in addition to their currency needs, which the currencies or the foreign currencies which were preserved in the central bank, and they confiscated the money and the funds of all of their enemies, and also imposing taxes under the pretext of like war taxes, and also confiscating all of the humanitarian aid provided to Yemen and making them a way to win affiliation for their benefit. The amount of aids provided to Yemen were not up to the level, but we appreciate all of the aids provided from Saudi Arabia and other sister countries, but still the need is really high among the Yemenis, and that's not enough, and people are in dire need and poverty. In addition to depending on the market of the oil products, using the black market only, and the returns of the oil only goes to the militias. I'd like to refer to the fact that the aid provided by also like this Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian governments imposed a lot of restraints against the money transfers to Saudi Arabia and from and to Saudi Arabia, and that led to to a more difficult situation. In addition to epidemics, the spread of epidemics, and the lack of vaccines, and the fact that many health centers are not operational, and some centers for treating chronic diseases. All of these things are accumulated, and they are among the misery of the Yemenis. And everybody knows that regarding media, many journalists and human rights activists have been imprisoned, and many journals and TV channels have been closed. And there is a lot of restrictions on all of the people that voice their opinions on social media, and people are not able even to like some posts. They will be subject to arrest. They might be arrested and imprisoned because of some social media posts. And after, they imposed many taxes on the society, and also they imposed some sectarian training courses to spread their sectarian thoughts that will destroy the social structure and texture, to spread the hate culture among the Yemenis, and also playing with the school curricula to spread their sectarian thoughts. This is the situation in general. There are many things I'd like to draw your attention to. First, the issue of murder against many people under the pretext that they belong to ISIS or something, and that was used as a pretext to liquidate many people. Torture, psychological and physical torture, which led to death. Also destroying places of worship, besieging cities and residential gatherings, killing civilians through mines and shelling and using ballistic rockets, forced disappearance against many activists and some leaders. And that was practiced against Mr. Muhammad Sabri, Mr. Muhammad Mansour Hadi, in addition to the sons of the previous President Saleh, in addition to forced displacement and forcing people to move from their houses, recruiting children, in addition to depriving about 3 million students from going to school and receiving education. In addition to imprisoning and violating and assaulting women who went on peaceful demonstrations, also raiding houses and violating them. Here I'd like to tell you that to tell you more about it, there are some practices are similar to some practices are practiced in the southern provinces against some practices against the northern provinces. Those acts were too bad, actually, and we condemn all of them.
الوضع بهذا التعقيد وبهذا التركيب يحتاج.
Of course, it's that difficult and complicated situation like this. We need not to have only just a conflict about describing the reality and how bad it is, but to overcome this and go beyond it, and to start talking about where is the way out. Mr. Ali Al-Ahmadi, the head of the member of the committee, in the consultative committee. He will tell us about the developments of the South, politically and militarily speaking. Peace be upon you. Good evening. Of course, Yemenis, we like to speak about things in a long manner, and those few minutes will not allow us to clarify. That's why Twitter did not succeed in Yemen. Facebook was the entrepreneur in Yemen because there is the ability to write more in it. I will move to another part in regard to Yemeni conflict, which is the South issue. The South these days witnesses a specific situation. Most of the areas are free and they are under the Sharia or legitimacy, and we can evaluate Yemen from what is happening in the South. One of the ironies is that the issue of the South at its peak, and the people who struggled in 2007, 8 were killed by the Ali Abdullah Saleh regime. At that time, all prisons were filled with them. The international media never talked about this. We never heard someone analyzing this, whether from the regions, countries, or even the international community. The UN did not have a position which was comforting for the Yemenis in the South. There was a marginalization of their case, an issue. Today, in 2015 and later, the South went through a number of changes. First, the president is from the South. The areas of the South are all under the control of the people of the South. There is security and military from the South. Nonetheless, now they started to spotlight the issues of the South, and this is done on the media, in the Arab channels, the regions, countries. There is now an international addressing of the South issue. This issue started to reappear in the Security Council. This is something which we need to stop and ponder at. What is the issue of the South? How did it start? Is it similar to other things in the international scene? Is it similar to Kurdistan and other places? There is a big difference. In reality, the South state, which have got independence in 60s, used to have the Unities project, which is the big Yemen. It did not continue because of the communist regime at that time, except for 23 years, and then had a unity with the South in 94. There was the war, and we all know what happened later. We can say one of the important points of the South is that it was always marginalized by Ali Abdullah Saleh. A lot of military personnel were fired fired. There also this coup against the agreement of unity, and this is why the movement of the South have started in 2006. This had continued to go on until against the regime, and until we had a dialogue, a Yemeni dialogue, where this issue was on top of the priorities. If the situation, as I have just described, which is that the South is under the control of the local people, and that we have the outcomes of the dialogue, and we have international resolutions to support this and to give also the rights of the people of the South. What is lacking? In a lot of people might overlook this. The South has an internal problem which started with the establishment of the government in '67. This is something which is present in all Arab countries. Not having one uniting factor, one side which helps solve the problems. Now we have marginalization of other and exploiting the power, and this is why we have 73's violence and 86 going forward and as an escape to the unity. This have fragmented the South. The South is in the hands of the people. They could not find a solution. Unfortunately, they don't have one political uniting side, and the door is open for international interventions. We mentioned the Iranian intervention in 2009. It's not as some Yemeni media talks about, saying that there is a Yemeni movement, the Iranian inside Yemen. No, the Iranians are clear about Yemen. They support Houthi group, which represents their project, which was expressed by one of the big officials. He said, now the fourth Arab capital had fallen when the Houthis seized Sana'a. Now, why would they say the same? Because the South and its project does not represent any interest for Iran. They only interfered in a very limited manner in the South by providing military training for some of the people in Beirut and other places. Now the regional countries have interfered more in supporting some of the southern forces and establishing military forces within the South, which represent the South. This is a problem which might lead to problems and conflicts within the South itself. We have tried to clarify to the envoy when we talk to each other that the South's issue cannot be represented through one person or one current or component. It's the issue of the whole nation, and it can be solved through the framework of the outcomes of the national dialogue, which was agreed on in 2014. We can divide the solutions for the South issue into two types. One on the long run, which is rebuild the southern society and community in the correct political manner. We did not have real parties in the South, and that's why we need to solve the issue of the South. And to do that, we need to build the political institutions through supporting pluralism, raising the awareness of the society about the rights, human rights, freedom of expression. And this is a solution which needs a lot of effort to be exerted. However, the emergency solution or the urgent solution can be through that. We cannot solve this issue unless it was within the border of the framework of regaining our state. We don't have a state in Yemen today, and in the southern area, which is under the supervision of the alliance itself, we don't have until now any court or also security apparatus established. All what is happening is having bits and pieces here and there from sides which are supported by external forces. We need to continue the political working on the political process, and the southern movement shall, with all its different representatives, shall be there. This political process shall resume from where it stopped before what had happened in 2014, and this political process shall lead to a constitution and then referendum, and this shall be what govern all the Yemeni sides. After of which presidential and parliamentarian elections are established, where we have parliaments in the southern regions. Through those parliaments, whether in Hadramaut region or Aden region, the aspirations of the people of the South are expressed, and they can reach the level of the politics which they have, which was approved for them through Riyadh and other conferences. I'd like to end by saying the issue of the South does not represent that the geography as much as saying that we need to regain the human being and solve and satisfy the basic needs and demands for freedom. We have about half an hour here in the room for comments, questions. We have described reality, and there were some of pieces of solutions which we can build on in the future. This is why I hope that we are not going to describe now in questions what is happening and the depth of this suffering, but to go in the direction maybe of what we need to do to finish this conflict. And we'll start with you. Is she? The mic is not working. The mic is not working. The mic is not working. I'm really sorry. I can't hear him. His mic is not working. His mic is not working. Please, someone should tell him that it's off or it's far from his mouth. Yes, the mic is not working. It's not yet working. He needs to put it on. No, he needs to have it on. It's off. I can hear his voice from outside. Not yet. I cannot hear him. Sorry. I can repeat your question for the translators. Please be short.
يقلل سقوط صنعاء تحت رقم 2140 قضت تشكيل لجنه عقوبات ضد الافراد والكيانات معدله للانتقال. صدر القرار الثالث عام 2201 في 15 فبراير 2015 طالب جماعه الحوثي، وهذا طبعا بعد السقوط بعد
Ses mi gelmiyor? Okey.
Gelmiyor.
طالب جماعه الحوثي سحب السلاحين من مؤسسه الحكومه. ثم بعد ذلك بعد حصول تدخل الحرب العربي في مارس صدر
The floor is not working, the mic of the floor. This is why you don't have a translation. I'm really sorry for you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
If we can just understand
And can
what is happening in the south. What is the role of the Emirates in the south? And what is going to develop along those lines? Is there going to be a separation between north and south once again? If it is not de jure, then de facto. If we can just understand.
لا شكرا. أستاذ جمال. السؤال واضح أستاذ علي.
سؤال الأستاذ الديلمي.
the question is, after the end of the war, how much you are ready to have partnership with your brothers in Yemen? My second question, why currently you still keep in presence hundreds of Yemenis? What is the evidence? Why do you keep this political leader while you claim to be a revolution with the rights of the Yemenis? We stop here and then we come back for another round. Mr. Ibrahim, you had two questions about the position of international resolutions and why do you think that they are against this movement while they were supportive of the movement of democracy. And although there are decisions against 2014, they did not do anything against this movement and they were assimilated in international dialogue later. And then the question of Mr. Jamal. Actually, I was optimistic before coming to the room that we will be discussing things which we can come up with solutions for future solutions to deal with. The Yemeni issues, a lot of brothers have talked about and were long in talking about things where they confused everything. Although the good points which they said were very few. What is the use of having a discussion like this and giving blames and accusations which might not hold in front of reality? When we talk about on the name of Ahmed Asiri a year ago, when he says that that they have had 100,000 dry raids against Yemen. And when we talk about tens of thousands of Yemenis who were killed everywhere, and when we talk about the infrastructure devastation, and when we talk about this siege of Yemen from everywhere. However, I did not talk about these issues because I have a desire to have this platform, a platform for solutions for the future. The question of Mr. Abdul Salam. Your question, Abdul Salam, in regard to international decisions and the position of the international community, and do we have a crisis? We are in a war, not in a crisis. We are in this crisis which all the world is in, starting with the Americans and ending with the Emiratis. We are talking about an existential issue in Yemen. A lot of Yemenis who are your brothers, who are Arabs, who are Muslims, who are close to you. We cannot flirt. We cannot say that Ansarullah or a big side of the Yemenis as being nice to us. After all this siege and after this killing, which was random, what type of punishment, the international community to do more to punish us? In regard to Brother Jamal, when we talk about, I would have loved if he asked this question. Is the regional community and the rest of the Yemenis are ready to live together and coexist and build one country for everyone? Are you all ready to exchange detainees and release the kidnapped from different sides, as was presented in the Kuwait agreement? Are you, Mr. Jamal, and you, from your position, you are someone who has experience, wouldn't you better to ask when is this going to end and to come up with the solutions which secure rights of Yemenis? We don't want a Yemen which is following other countries and which is taking orders from outside. This is what I can answer you with, since I'm working as a media person, as a politician from one of the components of the Yemeni society.
بالجنوب و
The roles. Now the question to you regarding the South and the Emirati role in the South, UAE role in the South. That was the question, right? As for the South and the North, the problem here now is that the vulnerability and the fragility of Yemen, of the Yemeni state, as I talked with one of the professors, the issue here might not relate it to the North and the South. And there is a statement from the previous Yemeni president, Nasser, from Moscow. He says that if there is any separation from the North and the South, the North will not be as it used to be, neither will the South. Now, the problem here is about the fragility of the Yemeni country, which allows for many forces to intervene and interfere and support some regions and areas. And we may hear about the presence of like 5 or 6 countries intervening in Yemen. Not only the role of some countries, the ones you mentioned, who are participating, but there are other countries which may intervene in Yemen. And in Yemen, there are foreign intelligence forces, and there are some operations. There used to be some operations and intelligence forces inside Yemen during the strength, during the time when Yemen was strong. So what about now? So there is only one solution. We need to find a compromise, to negotiate, to talk together, to talk about the one united Yemeni country that guarantees to all of the people their rights and freedoms and participation in the political decision and wealth and everything. Thank you.
Talk should help of peace and future of the Yemeni people. I have 2 very short questions. One from Mr. Abdul Malek. He said that 85% of the Yemens are under the control of the national.
Sorry, please stop a little bit. There's a technical problem. Sorry for that. Really sorry. Can you try it, please? Try the mic?
Yes.
No, it's not working. There's a problem. Yeah. I'm sorry, no, still there's a problem.
It's not with you.
Okay, my second question is from Mr. Muawdah.
Yes.
What's the position of the Yemen President Abdulwahhab regarding there are some news that UAE occupied island in the Yemen, Socotra.
Yeah.
What's the position of the president? Thank you.
No?
In the name of God, I didn't. I'm talking about the solution here. Now, let's focus on the solutions. Either political solution or we carry on with the military operations till the end. So what are the conditions of the political solution? Politically, we have a problem with the Houthis that they didn't they don't admit that they're a political group. They're dealing with the Yemenis that they have the right, the exclusive right of authority from God. This is a right taken from God. They claim that God gave power to only a group of people. This is politically speaking now. You cannot coexist with the Houthis. You cannot cooperate with them. You cannot come up with any political solution with this, within this belief that makes it impossible. Now, in military speaking, while we were going through negotiations, how can we guarantee that we can have a political solution which they can commit themselves to? Economically speaking, they have looted everything, whether the public wealth or people's properties. Socially speaking, they have created a sectarian problem which didn't exist in the past. How can we overcome that? These are important conditions for a coming political solution. Houthis should provide an opinion to solve these problems. They should have actually released some detainees to show good intentions. So why didn't they release all of those civilians to show good intentions? Is it possible to find a solution despite the presence of foreign agenda with strategic goals in the area? And is it possible for the two parties to pressure the foreign agenda to find a compromise to soothe the sufferings of the people? There is no sound. Sorry, no technical problem. Tell him to stop, please. No sound, no voice, nothing, no input. No input. No input. Between the control is in foreign hands. Is it possible to find a solution, or the solution will come from outside? Sorry, there is no input. No input. There are national and international actors. I think the Yemenis can only go through peace and talk about peace, and that'll be through political compromise, or through either through military solution or whatever. They have to go through a political negotiations. 3 negotiations are happening through under international patronage. One talk happening in Geneva, another one in Kuwait, in the framework of a political solution. Yemenis sit together, and there is no other solution for Yemenis except the political solution among themselves. The presence of a guarantor and with a transitional period, and that's what the Yemenis agreed on in Bell Conference. They agreed on finding a transitional phase And there was a transitional phase. Now, going back to the transitional phase, and people should talk together, and then the government will be the guarantor, learning from previous experiences. And so with the presence of this transitional period, they have to drop arms, disarmament. This issue has been discussed in Bell Conference with the help of the Arab League to disarm some militias. The Yemenis agreed in previous conferences. So there is only one solution, which is the political compromise, political solution, and to go back to the peace track. Mr. Adnan didn't ask any questions. There are no questions. He actually has illusions, many illusions in the thoughts of some Yemenis. And he's talking about like a right from God. Listen, now we as Yemenis, we need to understand that the outcomes of the conference, we need to consider all of them. I wished people focused on stopping war. We need to focus on that. But talking about the military solution and alluding to it as if it were a solution, but it's not. It's the cause of all of the miseries. Military decisiveness is not a choice, because there's a will to face that aggression. A lot of accusations are given randomly, and they're not questioning the international decisions. You're not talking about you're talking about a rifle in Yemen, and forget F-16 aircrafts and shelling, and we forget that some countries are occupying Yemen and killing Yemenis in the east and west. We as Yemenis have to go through a transitional period, ceasefire and real participation in all of the levels, as the National Conference stated, and we need to go through national reconciliation. And without national reconciliation, and if we keep tossing accusations, will never come to anything. The military solution has been tried for years, and it hasn't come up with anything. It's never been fruitful at all. I'd like to emphasize here that the Yemenis love peace, and they want peace in all of Yemen, but they want real peace. Peace that doesn't lead to war, as what happened in the past. People have been trying to go through negotiations and agreements, and then they're never implemented, and then they start war again. And the new period of war that is more miserable is taken. So people in Yemen want peace, and they will keep trying to regain peace. But sometimes the cost of war is less than the cost of peace, if the peace is not a real one. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. There's still a solution, a possibility for a solution, if we give the local solution to proceed to peace and to enforce the state institutions. The demands of the legitimate state here is that to disarm all of the militias and to go through a political compromise that includes all of the local actors, and to avoid all of the foreign forces. But things are getting more complicated, especially Iran. Iran recognizes that through local actors like Houthis, they can impact the scene completely. But today, The legitimate government recognizes that, and it's going through the goal of peace and political agreement, but that never happens except by disarming the militias among all of the armed groups. There are 2 points that have been mentioned, like what is the benefit, what is the role of President Hadi in relation to Socotra Island, and also another one in relation of the conflict among regional actors. Within that, is there a solution? Now, regarding the intervention of the Arab countries, of course, there are a lot of complexities in this regard. All interventions entail problems and complexities, but that problem must be attributed to the main problem. What led to all of these disasters? Therefore, people that are fighting should stop fighting, otherwise things will be more complicated. The second point here is it possible for Yemenis to agree without any regional role? The answer is no. There has to be a regional agreement. Yemen witnessed similar situations on the regional level, and wherever there is regional agreement, the local agreement would be easier. Yemenis can have the will and open the doors for solutions. Thank you. At the end of this session, I reiterate the thanks to Sharq Forum, and I hope in the future there will be more meetings which are characterized by real research characteristics, but not to agitate feelings. And I hope that all of the Yemenis would understand that this war is a lesson for all of us in how to rebuild the social structure and social texture and harmony. And I find myself agreeing with Mr. Mohammed Sabri in relation to the regional forces and the international forces in relation to the Yemeni cause, and we need to engage them in the political solution and the local or national reconciliation and the reconstruction of Yemen. And there is an Egyptian saying that says, entering the bathroom is not like exiting it. It's literal translation anyway. So we thank Al-Sharq Forum for this, and I hope that such forums and conferences will be repeated in the future, and there will be something special for Yemen where all of the parties participate, as we found energy, economy, and so on. And Yemen is still within the frame of the simple government governed by the tribes. The government is still not a real government in the modern sense. Despite the collapse of the state, still people are living and some institutions are operational. We hope that we get support for the idea of coexistence and reconciliation, because if the solution is not Yemeni, local Yemeni, there will never be a solution for the Yemeni cause or problem. I thank you very much. I thank the panelists for all of the contributions, and of course some people were fanatic to their opinions and there were some arguments, but in the forum we will keep working on the Yemeni parties, and we will keep pushing for dialogue among all of the parties. So in the coming meetings there will be a lot of dialogues and attempts to find solutions and common grounds. There will be now a 20-minute break, and then we'll come back here for the final session. Thank you for coming and for interacting, and we'll see you after break, and peace and blessings of God be upon you. Thank you.